Hi, I'm Glenda Cedarleaf, and tonight's story is based on the Christmas Reindeer. And this is part 2, written in 1929 by Thornton Burgess. So I invite you to take off your shoes, close your eyes, becoming comfortable in the ways that you know best, settling into your bed, feeling your body supported, aware of the softness of your sheets and blankets and pillow. Breathe in deeply and begin to let go of the thoughts and memories of the day. This is your time to simply settle into this story as we go on a journey to inspire you this Christmas. When at last Tuktu could find her tongue, all she could do was to whisper, "Are you the good spirit?" Those eyes looking at her in such a kindly way twinkled more than ever, and all the little laugh wrinkles around them grew deeper. He began to shake all over. He shook, and he laughed so merrily that presently Tuktu herself began to laugh. She couldn't help it. It was catching. Yes, sir, it was catching. "Ho, ho, ho," said he. "My dear Tuktu, it may be that I am that to you. I hope I am. It seems to me that nothing much nicer be, but elsewhere all the great world round, wherever there are children found, I'm known as Santa Claus, my dear. Or else, perchance, of me you hear as old Saint Nick, who once a year with pack and sleigh and wondrous dear to little folk who have been good and done those things that children should, brings Christmas Day the books and toys that always gladden girls and boys. But when the Christmas season ends, I hasten here to where my friends, the fairies, elves, and busy gnomes, for countless years have made their homes. You are, my dear, the first who ever ventured here." It was such a jolly voice, and those eyes twinkled so, and he shook all over so when he laughed, that Tuktu no longer had the slightest fear. "If you please, good Santa," said she, "I have never heard of Christmas. What is Christmas?" Santa's face sobered. All the lines softened from his face, and it became very beautiful. Simply so that Tuktu could fully understand, he explained that Christmas is the season of loving thought. It is the season when self is forgotten, and the desire of each is to make others happy. He told her that Christmas was about the birth of the Christ child who brought love to the world. He told her that he now carries Christmas joy to the boys and girls of all the great world. He told her how all the year through the fairies and elves and trolls and gnomes were busy down in this valley, hidden by the wondrous many-colored mist, making the things which he was to take on his yearly journey to make glad the hearts of little children. He told her how the spirit of love was abroad throughout the great world in the Christmas season, and how those who do for and give to others are the ones in whom the Christmas spirit lives all the year through. and who thus find the greatest happiness. "It's not in receiving, my dear," said he, "but in giving, in love, you will find to be that fullness of joy and that sweet content. For this is what the beautiful Christmas season is meant." "And does no one give to you, kind Santa?" Tuktu asked a little breathlessly. You should have heard Santa Claus laugh then. Indeed, you should have heard him laugh. You should have seen his eyes twinkle. "Every year I receive the greatest gift in all the great world," said he. "And what is that?" whispered Tuktu. "The love of little children," replied Santa Claus. "Not in all the great world is there any gift to compare with the love of little children, and it is mine every Christmas." Tuktu still sat on the back of Whitefoot. As Santa Claus talked, he came over to Whitefoot and gently stroked his face. Whitefoot stood without motion. It was the more surprising because Whitefoot had always been rather unruly. He never had been one to willingly acknowledge a master. Only Tuktu had been able to handle him without trouble. Santa looked up straight into the eyes of Tuktu. "Tell me, my dear," said he, "how you came to venture into this valley. Did you not know that only the deer folk come here?" "Yes, I knew," replied Tuktu in a low voice. "I knew, good Santa, and I would not have thought of coming myself. It was Whitefoot who brought me here. He brought me here, and I didn't know where he was bringing me." Then she told how she had been lost in the fog, and how when she had awakened from her nap in the midst of the great herd, she had discovered where she was. She told how she would have left even then, but could not, and her lips trembled a little as she talked, for she was fearful that the good spirit might think that she had done wrong. "And why do you think that the deer folk come here every year?" inquired Santa Claus. "That the blessed 8 may be chosen," said Tuktu. "And what, my dear, do you mean by the blessed 8? Santa Claus inquired. Then Tuktu told him of the tale she had heard around the winter fire pots, and how it had been long known that every year 8 deer were chosen from the great herd in the Valley of the Good Spirit, and how the following year these deer always returned to their owners, and were the finest sled deer in all the north, so that the owner of one of these was considered blessed above his fellows. Santa Claus sighed. "They ought to be good sled deer," said he. "I spend enough time in training them. For what purpose, my dear, do you think these deer are chosen each year?" Tuktu shook her head. "That," said she, "no one knows. All that is known is that each year the 8 deer are chosen, and the following year they are returned to bless their owners. That is enough. The good spirit has some wise purpose, or the deer would not be taken and returned." "Do you know," said Santa, "that the reindeer are among the oldest of all the peoples of the earth?" "It is so. It has been said that man and woman were created to look after the reindeer, and the reindeer were created to look after them. Almost since man and woman began, the reindeer have furnished them with food and clothing, and carried them or drawn them wherever they wish to go. Have you driven deer to the sled? Have you ever sat behind a running reindeer and felt the rush of the cutting wind, and felt now and then the sting of the snow thrown from his flying feet?" Tuktu's eyes shone and she clapped her hands softly. "Don't you love it?" she cried. Santa Claus nodded and he chuckled. "That is why the 8 deer are chosen each year. When I made my first Christmas journey, it was a reindeer who drew my sled. My pack was small and my journey was short, and a single deer was all I needed. But as the Christmas spirit swept farther and farther throughout the great world, and more children looked for my coming, my pack became larger and I had to travel much faster. So then I used 2 deer, and then 3, 4, 5, until now 8 are needed. 8 of the finest deer to be found in all the herds. They must have speed and strength, for they must take me fast and carry me far. They must have beauty with antlers of many points. They must be stout of heart and full of courage. They must be gentle. So it is that each year I must get a new team. And so each year the reindeer, the finest in all the great Northland, feed for a while in Kringle Valley. Then when the time comes, as it came today, they pass before me at their best, that I may choose those for my next Christmas journey into the great world. Those you saw vanish in the colored mist are the 8 who will take me next Christmas to carry joy to little folk. In all that great herd you saw, there is none other the equal of those chosen, and all the deer folk know it. Just once will they make that wonderful journey, for only for that one time will they be at their very best. At the next Christmas there will be 8 others to take their places. But always the 8 bear the same names. Would you like to hear them, Tuktu? Shyly, Tuktu nodded. "If you please," she said. My, how the eyes of old Santa Claus twinkled. They are Donder and Blitzen, Dancer and Prancer, Dasher and Vixen, Comet and Cupid, said he. I couldn't drive deer by any other names. They are magic names, and those deer will become magic deer when they start on their Christmas journey. Now, my dear, Whitefoot will take you straight back to the place from which he brought you. You have seen that which you may never see again, the choosing of the deer. But always you will remember that in the valley of the good spirit, love dwells, and that love may be carried throughout the world. Donder and Blitzen, Dasher and Vixen, Dancer and Prancer, Comet and Cupid, repeated Tuktu to herself, and her eyes were like stars. Do the children out in the great world love them? You should have seen Santa's eyes twinkle then, and you should have seen all the laugh wrinkles around his eyes. I suspect they do, said he, and they must love the ones who bring me to them each year. But they have never seen my reindeer, so I really don't know. And then you should have seen Tuktu's eyes open. Do you mean, she asked, that they never ever have seen your deer? Santa Claus nodded. That's what I mean, said he. You see, the night before Christmas, when I make that magic trip, I must go so far, and I must go so fast that there is no time, not even 1 wee minute, to waste. And so no one sees me then. Sometimes little boys and girls hide and watch for me and for my deer, but they never see us. and those little boys and girls do not always find all the things they hoped I would bring them. A dreamy look had come into Tuktu's eyes, a very faraway look. Do they have as fine deer out there in the great world as we have here? She asked. They have no deer at all, little one, said he. That is, they have no reindeer. Most of them would not know a reindeer if they saw one. No reindeer? Cried Tuktu, and such a look of astonishment as spread over her face. How can they live without the wonderful deer? I'm so sorry for those children. I wish... Tuktu paused. What do you wish, child? Santa Claus asked in his kindly voice. Tell me what you wish, for you know it is my business to make the wishes of children come true. Tuktu hesitated. She dropped her eyes shyly. I wish, she said very softly, that I could send them some reindeer. Santa Claus looked at her sharply. He could read her thoughts, and there was not one single little thought of self there. She was thinking of the children who had never seen the reindeer, and how wonderful it would be if only they could see the blessed eight. When she looked up and saw Santa's kindly eyes studying her, she spoke impulsively. Kind Santa Claus, said she, speaking hurriedly, so hurriedly that the words tripped over each other. Couldn't you go down early some year with your blessed deer so that the children of the great world might see them? I know they would love them just as I do. Santa Claus sighed. I am afraid, said he, there isn't time. You know, it takes time to train deer, and there are no deer in all the great Northland so well trained as those which take me out into the great world every Christmas. You saw the 8 chosen today. It will take me most of my time from now until Christmas to get them properly trained for that magic journey. If the deer were better trained when I got them, I might be able to do it. You know, I don't even have to have reins. They're so perfectly trained. That is why when I am through with them, they are the finest sled deer in all the world. They are no longer magic deer, but they are wonderful sled deer. So you think the children of the great world would like to see the deer? Perhaps they would. I shall have to think it over, my dear. I certainly shall have to think it over. Oh, if you only would, cried Tuktu, her dark eyes shining with excitement. I wish I could help. I'm so sorry for children who have never seen the beautiful deer. Down somewhere in the midst of the wonderful mist, a silver bell rang. It was so clear, so sweet, that Tuktu turned her head to listen. When she looked back, Santa Claus had disappeared. The bell rang again, and from out the curtain of mist came Santa's voice once more. Goodbye, little girl, said he. The great herd moves, and you must leave the valley. But remember this, my dear. To those who love is love given in return. That is why Christmas is. Remember that, my dear, and always your Christmas will be merry. Better than that, it will be happy. Abruptly, Whitefoot turned and began to move away. With his long, swinging trot, Whitefoot rapidly made his way out of the Valley of the Good Spirit. Once only did Tuktu look back at the cloud of shimmering, many-colored mist. At one point it glowed a rich, deep red, and as she looked, this turned to rose, and finally to a faint pink, and then vanished. Nowhere was the good spirit to be seen. Out of the valley, over the hill, climbed Whitefoot, and Tuktu turned him in the direction of the camp. There, presently, she fastened him where Aklak had put him to graze. Her father and brother had not returned. As in a dream, she looked back to the hills around the valley of the good spirit. Could it be that she had really been there? Was it not all a dream? But if it were a dream, it had been a wonderful dream, the most beautiful of all dreams. Then she saw off in the distance Tuktu and Aklak approaching. When they reached her, they were in high spirits. They had had good hunting, and they brought plenty to eat. Tuktu cried, "They've moved. The deer have left the valley of the good spirit." Then she told her father and brother of her adventure in the valley of the good spirit. At first, Aklak laughed, as she had known he would. "It was a dream, Tuktu," he cried. "It was a dream. You must have slept through that fog while Father and I were hunting, and the dream spirits took you with them. No one ever has seen the good spirit, and no one ever will." But Tuktu stubbornly insisted that it was not a dream, until at last even Aklak began to believe that it might be so. You would have laughed to hear him ply her with questions, all the time pretending that he didn't believe a word of it. Tuktu told him, "The children outside of our beautiful Northland have no reindeer. Most of them have never seen a reindeer." "Well, what drags their sleds then? Dogs?" demanded the practical Aklak. "No," replied Tuktu. "They have other animals called horses, but they cannot be beautiful like our deer, for they have no antlers. But all those children have heard of our reindeer, Aklak, and there is a certain time in the winter called Christmas, when, in the night, after everyone is asleep, there comes the children's saint and visits each home. And Aklak, he comes with reindeer." Aklak looked up quickly. "The good spirit?" he cried. Tuktu's eyes were shining as she nodded. "It must be," she said, "for who else would have reindeer? And listen, Aklak, he is short and round and shakes when he laughs, and he has a white beard and a fur-trimmed coat and a fur-trimmed hat. And his reindeer take him right up on the roofs of the houses. And then he takes a pack on his back and goes right down the chimney. And he leaves gifts for little children while they're asleep. When he has made his visit, he goes right up the chimney again and jumps in his sleigh and calls to his reindeer, and away he goes to the next stopping place. And he makes all those visits in one night. No wonder he wants reindeer. No wonder he wants the very best reindeer." "But if no one ever sees him, how do they know what he looks like?" demanded practical Aklak. "Oh," replied Tuktu, "it is only on the night before Christmas that he never is seen. I mean, he's never seen coming down the chimney and putting the gifts for the children where they'll find them. But he is seen off and going about before Christmas, for he has to find out where the children live so they can receive the presents. And the children give him letters and tell him what they want. So he leaves the Northland early, sometime before Christmas, and goes out into the great world. Then he returns for the gifts, and the night before Christmas makes that wonderful flying trip with the deer. He loves reindeer. Of course he loves the reindeer, Aklak interrupted. How could he help loving the reindeer? Aren't they the most important animals in all the great world? The reindeer work for us. They carry us where we want to go. We do not have to carry food for them, for they find it for themselves. They furnish us with food and clothing and our tents. Tuktu agreed with Aklak and then continued. Aklak, the good spirit told me that all over that land at Christmas time they have beautiful green trees covered with lights at night and many shining things. And sometimes these trees are hung with presents for the boys and girls. And sometimes the good saint appears at one of these trees and with his own hands gives the gifts to the children. But the very day after Christmas, he disappears, and he is seen no more until the Christmas season comes again. And no one knows where he is. All the children wonder and wonder where he is all through the year, but they've never been able to find out. But do we know, Aklak, that the children's saint is the Good Spirit who lives in the valley of the Good Spirit? Oh, Aklak, wouldn't it be too wonderful if he would choose our deer for that marvelous Christmas journey? Much to her surprise, Tuktu felt him looking at her with a respect in his black eyes, which was new in her experience. And she noticed, too, that he no longer teased her. Never had he been so gentle and thoughtful, yet never once could she get him to say that he believed the story of the Valley of the Good Spirit. Now there was one thing that Tuktu did not tell Aklak. It was that the last deer chosen was from their father's own herd. Never had Kutak had a deer chosen by the Good Spirit from his herd. Until now. Tuktu had known that it was her father's deer because she had been near enough to see the earmark. Besides, there was no other deer in the herd to compare with it. Sometimes when Aklak insisted that it was all a dream, she would be almost persuaded that he was right, but then she would remember that it was her father's finest deer, Speedfoot, which had been chosen. If, she would say to herself, we cannot find Speedfoot in the roundup, I shall know for certainty that I did not dream. It will be the proof. Thereafter she spent many hours wandering in and out through the great herd, looking for this particular deer, and rejoicing that she could not find it. And while Tuktu dreamed her daydreams as she worked, little Spot, the finest young deer in all the herd, was dreaming daydreams. And the strange thing was that his dreams were very like the dreams of Tuktu. He dreamed of being a magic deer. He dreamed of being one of that team of magic deer with which the Good Spirit made his wonderful journey out into the great world each Christmas. For he had discovered that it was the strongest and swiftest deer that were chosen to draw the sleds of the herders. But there was one big difference in the dreaming of these two young dreamers. Tuktu had no thought of herself, whereas little Spot was thinking chiefly of his own glory. He had no thought of others, but only great ambition for himself. There are many people like little Spot in the great world. All that winter, Aklak worked with his 8 deer. Every day he drove one or another of them. Spring came, and before the snow was gone, the fawns were born. It was a cold, cold world that those baby deer came into, but they did not seem to mind it. Those were busy days for Tuktu and Aklak, for they spent much time looking after the mother deer and to see that their babies were properly taken care of. Now and then they would find a fawn that had lost its mother, and then would begin a search for the mother. Little by little the snow disappeared, and the big herd began to move toward the sea. It was heading toward the summer range. And at last, all the fawns were earmarked. Each owner counted his deer and knew just how much his herd had increased. And soon as there was a chance, Tuktu whispered in Aklak's ear, "I told you that Speedfoot was not in the herd. Wait now until the herd moves up to the Valley of the Good Spirit, and you'll find him there." Of course, Kutak had been watching for that particular deer. It had been the pride of his heart the year before, and its disappearance had worried him. He had thought that somehow it might have been overlooked on the winter grazing grounds. But when the roundup was over, he knew that the animal was not in the herd. And he was torn between fear and hope. His hope was they would find Speedfoot bearing the earmarks of the Good Spirit. To Kutak and to Aklak, it was merely a hope, but to Tuktu, it was a certainty. She hadn't the least shadow of a doubt, and her heart sang for joy. It was late when Kutak and his family reached the camp near the Valley of the Good Spirit. The snow had been just right, and the reindeer had traveled steadily and fast, for they were in splendid condition. Now they were fastened out, each tied by a long line to a hummock under the snow. There was plenty of food here, and the deer at once began to paw down to get it. Kutak and Anana had no thought for anything but rest after the evening meal. But not so their two children. They could not forget that they were in sight of the hills around the Valley of the Good Spirit, and that it might be over there in that valley were the 8 missing deer. So when their father and mother were asleep, they slipped out from the hut for a look over toward the wonderful valley. For was it not from that valley that the marvelous northern lights flashed up through the sky? There was no wind. The cold was intense. But Tuktu and Aklak were dressed for it, and they minded it not at all. It seemed as if the stars were so close that they could be reached. It was not moonlight, for this was the period when the moon was not visible, but the starlight almost made up for it. And then, as they stood there looking over toward the Valley of the Good Spirit, a long streamer of light suddenly flashed out. And up, until it was quite overhead, it quivered, almost died down, and then shot up again. Then came another and another and another. The northern lights, the merry dancers of the sky, dimmed the stars and made the night almost as light as day. At first, these northern lights were simply white, and then they were shot with yellow and red. Even though they had seen these fires of the sky many times, this time it was different. They caught their breath and held to each other with a little bit of fear. Those fires were no longer mere flashing white, shimmering, dancing streamers of light. Now they were yellow and red in many shades, and they appeared as if in very truth they were fires leaping high into the sky. And as they had so often heard it said, those dancing, leaping lights were coming out of the valley of the Good Spirit. Certainly they were flashing from directly behind the hills that shut away that valley. So of course they must be coming from the valley. Then the lights died down, and for a few moments there was no light save from the stars. Then from directly over the valley of the Good Spirit, a long streamer of white flickering light crept up, and as it crept, it broadened until it was like a broad path across the sky toward the south. There was the tinkle of silver bells. Tuktu touched Aklak. "See, Aklak, see the deer," she whispered. But Aklak had already seen them. On that broad, shining path, a pair of reindeer had appeared. He knew them instantly. They were two of the deer he had trained and which had disappeared. Out of the shimmering light behind them moved two more. And then he recognized there could be no doubt. He would have known them among 10,000 deer. They were harnessed 2 and 2, and as they moved forward, another pair appeared, and then another. Clinging together, breathless, round-eyed, Aklak and Tuktu stared. 8 deer they counted, 8 deer harnessed 2 and 2. Would there be more? The curtain of light low above the hilltop seemed to burst in a glory of color, such as made what they had seen before seem as nothing. And out of the midst of that glory, drawn by the 8 deer, came a sled. On it, Tuktu recognized instantly Santa Claus, the Good Spirit, whom she had seen in the valley. He was short and jolly and round and fat, with a fur-trimmed coat and a fur-trimmed hat, and he laughed. "Hello, little folk," he cried, "hello. The boys and girls of the world this year will see for themselves my splendid deer, will see and love them and surely know that the reindeer come, though there be no snow. For their magic deer for my magic sleigh, and we circle the world in a single day. There is naught so faithful and naught so quick to carry the message of old Saint Nick. By training my steeds you have saved for me some weeks of labor, and so you see, it happens I'm able to start this year in time for the children to see the deer. And all who see them, I tell you true, a Christmas greeting will send to you. As you will have given joy to all the little folk of the great world this year, in like degree will your own Christmas be merry, and will happiness fill your hearts. And now, my dears, I must away." Santa waved a mittened hand to them, then turned to his deer and cried, "Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer, now Vixen, on Donder and Blitzen." Down a shining path of light, across the sky toward the south, the 8 deer dashed, until in a breath they were mere specks. Up from the valley, the orange and red lights streamed higher and higher, until all the sky was a blaze of beautiful light. When the lights died down, only the stars were to be seen, twinkling so close that it seemed as if they might be picked from the sky. And thus it was that Tuktu and Aklak found happiness and great content because of their trust in the power of the Good Spirit and their special connection to the magnificent reindeer that helped to bring Christmas love and joy and wonder not only to their lives, but to all the children of the world. And that's the end of our story. And I wish you sweet dreams and good night and happy holidays.